The bus rolled into the small Montana town just before sunset, its tires hissing against gravel like a warning no one heard. Dust curled through the air, glowing gold in the fading light. Inside sat a young woman with trembling hands folded in her lap. Her name was Alara Petrov. The townsfolk would later remember her as the quiet bride who stepped off the bus. With a bruise blooming purple beneath her left eye, she had answered an advertisement months ago. A marriage arrangement, a fresh start, a ranch in America, a husband who promised stability. Instead, she carried a small suitcase, a thin coat unsuited for the mountain cold, and fear she could not hide. The first person to see her clearly was not the man who ordered her. It was the rancher. Cade Holloway had come into town for horse feed and fence wire. He stood near the general store, hat low over his brow, broad shoulders cutting a silhouette against the sky. He wasn't a man who missed details. Years of ranch life had sharpened his instincts. He noticed the way the girl stepped down carefully, like every movement hurt. He noticed how she flinched when the heavyset man pushed past her from behind. That man was Arthur Pike. Arthur marched forward, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're late," he snapped under his breath as he grabbed Alara's wrist too tightly. Cade's jaw tightened. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew Bruises, and he knew fear when he saw it. Arthur dragged her toward a rusted pickup truck parked crookedly in the dirt. Alara stumbled. The suitcase fell. Clothes spilled slightly from the broken zipper. Arthur cursed and yanked her upright hard enough that she gasped. That was the moment Cade moved. He crossed the street slowly, boots steady, presence commanding without effort. "You might want to ease your grip," he said calmly. Arthur turned. "Mind your business." Cade's eyes shifted to Alara. Up close, he could see more. A cut near her temple. Faint finger-shaped marks on her arm. That something inside him settled into certainty. "This is my business now," Cade replied quietly. Alara didn't understand everything being said. Her English was careful and accented, but she understood. Tone. For the first time since stepping off that bus, she felt something shift. Arthur scoffed. "She's my wife." Cade didn't look at him. He looked at her. "Is that what you want?" The question hit like thunder. Arthur squeezed her wrist, harder in warning. Alara swallowed. Her voice trembled, but it came out clear. "No." Silence swallowed the street. Arthur laughed harshly. "She doesn't know what she's saying." Cade stepped closer. Not aggressive, not loud, just certain. "She's coming with me." And in that moment, everything changed. Arthur protested. But Cade Holloway was not a man easily moved once his mind settled. The town knew it. Arthur knew it too. There was something in Cade's stare, something that promised consequences without shouting. "This isn't your concern, Arthur." Hissed. Cade's response was simple. "It is now." Alara stood frozen between them, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear. She had endured the journey across an ocean. She had endured Arthur's temper from the moment he met her in the city 2 days earlier. The promises in his letters had vanished the second she arrived. The first bruise had come before sunset, and now a stranger was offering escape. It felt unreal. Arthur stepped forward as if to pull her back, but Cade shifted his stance subtly, placing himself between them. Not violent, just immovable. "You lay a hand on her again," Cade said evenly, "and you'll answer to me." Arthur's face flushed red with fury, but he calculated. Cade was taller, broader, known in this county. Picking a fight here wouldn't end well. "This isn't finished," Arthur spat before climbing into his truck and roaring away. Gravel spraying behind him, the street slowly exhaled. Cade turned back to Alara, up close. She looked even smaller than he'd thought, frightened but holding herself together with stubborn pride. "You safe to walk?" he asked. She nodded automatically, though she wasn't sure. He picked up her fallen suitcase, ignoring the tear in its seam. "My ranch is 10 miles out. You can stay there tonight. No pressure, no expectations." Her eyes searched his face for deception. She found none. "Why?" she asked softly. Cade paused before answering. "Because no one deserves to be dragged." That was all. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she believed him. They rode out beneath a sky spilling into deep violet. The ranch came into view as darkness settled. Wide pastures, sturdy fences, a weathered but proud house lit warmly from inside. It didn't look like a prison. It looked like possibility. When Cade opened the front door, he didn't step in first. He stepped aside. After you. It was the smallest gesture, but to Alara, it felt like stepping into a different world. The Holloway Ranch carried the quiet strength of years built by calloused hands inside. The air smelled of cedarwood and something simmering on the stove. Cade moved with simple efficiency, setting her suitcase down, pouring water, keeping distance so she wouldn't feel cornered. "You can take the spare room," he said. "Bathroom's down the hall. There's clean clothes in the dresser. Belonged to my sister when she visited." Alara nodded, still unsure how to trust safety. "Arthur," she began hesitantly. "Won't step foot on my land," Cade interrupted. Gently, not without regret. It wasn't a threat. It was fact. Later that night, as wind whispered across the plains, Alara stood in front of the mirror in the spare bedroom. She studied the bruise on her cheek, the mark of a promise broken. But she also saw something else. A choice downstairs. Cade sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing in particular. He didn't know this woman, didn't know her past, didn't know why her refusal had sounded like both terror and bravery wrapped together. He only knew one thing: she had said no, and that should have been enough for anyone. Outside, somewhere beyond the fences, headlights briefly flickered on the distant road before disappearing again. Arthur wasn't done, but neither was Cade Holloway. And neither, though she didn't realize it yet, was Alara. The storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. Morning broke with cold clarity over the ranch. Frost clung to fence rails. Horses exhaled mist into the dawn. Alara woke slowly, disoriented by silence that didn't carry shouting. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she remembered the man who said, "You're coming with me." Not as ownership. As rescue. She dressed carefully in borrowed clothes and stepped outside. The land stretched endlessly, open and honest. Cade stood near the corral, repairing a loose board. He noticed her immediately, but didn't stare. "Coffee's inside," he called. "Breakfast too." She approached slowly. "Thank you for yesterday." He nodded once. "You don't owe me thanks. I owe you safety," she replied quietly. That made him pause. "You don't owe me anything," he said firmly. The words settled deeper than he intended. Later that morning, a sheriff's truck rolled up the dirt path. Arthur had filed a complaint. He claimed interference, claimed his lawful bride had been taken. Alara's hands trembled when the sheriff asked questions. Cade stood nearby but didn't answer for her. "She stays because she chooses," he said calmly. "Ask her." And they did. The wind lifted strands of her hair as every fear pressed in. If she went back, the bruises would multiply. If she stayed, she risked scandal, isolation, uncertainty. But for the first time in her life, someone waited for her answer instead of deciding it. She lifted her chin. "I stay." Arthur, watching from his truck at the gate, looked like a man denied something he believed was property. But she was never property, and Cade made sure everyone understood it. Days turned into a fragile rhythm. Alara helped mend fences, learned the horses' temperaments, cooked meals infused with spices from her homeland. Slowly, laughter began slipping into conversations. Cade discovered she was educated, sharp, fiercely resilient beneath gentleness. Lara discovered Cade carried grief, a fiancé lost years ago in a winter accident. Since then, he had built walls instead of rooms. They didn't rush anything. Trust grew in quiet moments, shared glances across fields, hands brushing accidentally while passing tools, late evenings on the porch beneath endless stars. But Arthur watched. Rumors spread in town. Some said Cade had stolen another man's bride. Others whispered about the bruises they'd seen. Then one night, a barn caught fire. Flames roared against black sky. Cade ran toward danger without hesitation. Alara followed despite his shout to stay back. Together they freed the horses, coughing, through smoke and heat. And in the chaos, Arthur appeared at the edge of the property. Rage twisted his features. Cade saw him, understanding hit instantly. The fight that followed was swift and brutal. Years of restrained fury met reckless desperation. When it ended, Arthur lay in the dirt, defeated not just physically, but morally exposed. The sheriff took him away in cuffs, this time. No one protested. Weeks later, the ranch stood repaired. Stronger. So did they. Elara no longer flinched at sudden movement. The bruise had faded completely, replaced by sun-warmed skin and steady confidence. One evening, as golden light poured across the fields, Cade stood beside her at the fence line. "I never meant to interfere," he said quietly, "but I'd do it again." She smiled softly. "I'm glad you did." Silence stretched comfortably between them. "I don't want to be rescued forever," she added. "You won't be," he replied. "You'll stand beside me, or not at all." That was the difference. Not ownership, partnership. Elara reached for his hand first this time, and when she spoke, her voice carried no tremor. "I'm choosing you." Cade exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for years. Above them, the Montana sky burned wide and endless. No walls, no cages, no chains. Just open land, open choice, and a future neither of them ordered, but both had chosen.